they weren't even called AI avatars, like virtual assistants, like digital avatars. There's so many names before the official terms. Like I
Yes.
guess it's not even all that official, but the common terms we use today. But when you look back, even 10, even 20 years, there's some versions of that.
Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of Video Learning Lab. Today I'm talking with Fei Wu. Fei Wu is a Chinese American video marketing influencer. She helps a lot of small businesses and companies and other humans to showcase their products and services. And our conversation covers a lot of different interesting topics that I think are especially relevant for today's audience, mainly how are AI tools affecting how people create videos online and for themselves. We talk a lot about how she cracked the code of YouTube, which is something that a lot of folks are still seeking to do. And then most importantly, what's her creative process? How do we start making videos? How can we make useful videos? How can we make videos that convert? And so today I'm really grateful to have her on. It's one of our first conversations where we're not speaking exclusively with an L&D professional, but rather I think this one is super critical because Fei Wu has really cracked the code on how to make better videos. So let's get to it. It's interesting too because Avatar, at least from my understanding, was originally used as a term to say like a representation of a person's presence within a digital space. So thinking
Mhm.
very and look, Faye, I can edit
Yeah.
this however. So I'm happy to just get right into it if
Yeah,
that's okay
sure.
with you.
Let's get into it. If you want to do an intro, whatever. I'm just let me
I'll
to
just put the intro on the back end. I just want to talk to you, to be honest,
sure.
and then I'll chop it up and we can go in those different directions. But I think since we're talking about it, an avatar, as I've kind of wrapped my head around it, is very much from humans first. Figuring out what is our representation, what is the presence that we occupy in the digital space. And I think that the easiest thing for folks to wrap their heads around is this idea of avatars in video games, where it's like
Mhm.
I am the person with the controller, but I'm moving the person who represents me on screen. But I think it is interesting as we're in this age of, hey, I'm having a talking head on screen. Does that still fit in to how we use this word avatar? So I'm curious how you're thinking about it now, especially as the tech gets more and more evolved and advanced.
hmm It's funny that you mentioned gaming, even though I'm not really a big gamer, and I don't even think of myself as someone who has previously played a lot of video games. However, when I was in Beijing this time, I saw that gaming is so prevalent in everybody's lives, including when you walk through the malls. All the video stations are right there. And because of our conversation, it triggered me to really do a little bit more of research, pay more attention. And young people are sitting there, like you said, now you're able to like scan your face and
Yes.
play some of the video games. Like it really feels like it's you compared to, when I played the video games, I guess when I was like 12 or 15, you have to assume that a character was more like you. So as you know, Kevin, by selecting whatever the avatar, whether representation, or the character is on screen as close to you as possible. And I remember back then it's like, well, what does that even mean? If there are more European and Western looking characters, I would be selecting the Asian one. And I paid attention to the hair. And I see that continue on with some of the avatars, personal avatars on iPhone and Android devices, and people trying to create that. Even though so cartoonish, people are like, that really looks like you, Kevin. That's really like you. And now our conversation, it kind of has reached a whole other level where it's truly you, as close to you as the tech can be right now. It's just fascinating.
It is, but before we started recording, we were talking about beauty filters, and in particular, I know you were talking about you just got a new Huawei phone, and for those who are iPhone users, we're living, I think, in the past when it comes to some of the digital cameras and the technology. And I remember growing up, all my Korean friends and Japanese friends, they had like the latest tech. And it just looks completely different from um, kind of what we're experienced with. I'm wondering, is that something that you noticed or you grew up with? Like, how do you make sense of it when you're there? Like this like tech bridge between what we think we have in the West versus when you're in Asia. What do you see?
So I think because I spend most of my time living in the US, for people who are listening or watching this, so Boston, more accurately 45 minutes west of Boston. I would say, especially during the pandemic, I was here this whole time, as opposed to the 20 years before that. I was traveling back to Asia, traveling in Asia, primarily China, every single year. So once you're here for a little while, you kind of don't think about it. I think that's
Mhm.
fascinating because you're hanging out with your friends, everybody's taking out their phone, no matter how ugly the photos are, and you post on social media, you do some tweaks after. But I noticed when I went back to Beijing this time, and we're just like family gathering, we're not even talking about influencers and digital natives. And so my relatives were taking photos and I immediately saw the difference. I was like, oh, I'm really tired and jet lagged. How come I look pretty peachy, like really awake right now? What's going on? And you're busy in these conversations. And they told me, they, as in all of them, are aware that the beauty cameras for both photos and videos are already built into the camera. And you
Yeah.
can apply different adjustments, and there are filters that are already in there, very natural. I gotta say, like 4 or 5 years ago, I guess 2018, 19, I saw some of the filters I immediately did not want to use because it was greatly exaggerated. So now I was made aware. And, immediately, Kevin, I was thinking, like, well, this is going to help with content creation. Like, I don't really have to maybe put on makeup anymore. I'm thinking about
Yeah.
productivity and saving time and looking decent and still realistic. That at least is for my goal. And
Yes.
yeah, I was into it. I was like, this is kind of cool.
It's interesting because, what you mentioned about, these features have been around for 4 or 5 years, and the degree that you can tweak or tune your image to kind of what you think you look like. I think it's interesting because one, you're changing how you actually look, and then it makes me think of who are you doing this for? Are you doing it for yourself or for your audience? And then if it's for your audience, then what purpose? But then also, as we cut to 4 or 5 years from now, what is different? Or 4 or 5 years from then, it's that these features are already starting to be productized or bundled in with
Mm,
the tool itself, so that you're not even seeing this on the front on the you're not even seeing the back end kind of how it all works. You're kind of just saying, oh, here's my picture, you get the result, and you're like, looks good, and then moving on. So I think what's interesting for me is this balance between there are those of us who are, I guess, creators and tweakers and people who love that level of minute detail, but as these products get more widely adopted, and you brought up this idea of filters, which I think of like Snapchat, how many
mhm,
filters there are that just mount to the face. It's not like you're choosing the degree to which you're represented. You just apply the filter and you
mhm.
take the output. And so there's this interesting balance I think that's happening with um, as new tech comes along. Does it make it easier just to like create the thing, like a creative picture of yourself or a video using tech, or is it about um, I guess more control. And I think I'm curious. I know you work with your audience. You work with a lot of folks who are have a range of experience, from folks who are working on Zoom for the first time, or who are people looking. And we can talk about this in just a bit, kind of what Feisworld is, because I think I'm absolutely fascinated by your creative process and approach. But you also have folks who've stagnated on YouTube. It's like a kit that they can and tools that they can use to better themselves. But where do you see people ending up on this tech spectrum? Are they looking, or do you see it's more people who are jumping in for the first time? Is it people who are looking to evolve their practice? Kind of, what do you see happening as more and more of these AI tools come out?
I think more people are going to try to get on the train, at least like in my community. And I know that we kind of live in a bubble, so to speak, Kevin. Like
Yeah.
we're interacting, we're talking to people more like ourselves a lot of the time. So I am aware that there are people exist outside of our bubble too,
Yes.
and have respect for them and their decisions. But within my bubble, within the club we're in, I think a lot of people are really experimenting and be very aware of the need for AI tools. So I want to go back just like to a few minutes ago. I think it's important for us to leverage, AI tools, including filters like beauty filters, and then like putting on different, I don't know, gadgets and hats and things like that. It's really fun. It is for fun, but to know that yourself still exists and there's still a chance there, you can still choose how you want to look. You can combine some of the AI characters, avatars, and sometimes it's just you. And sometimes you want to use filters, sometimes you don't. And maybe some people will say that that's a little
Yeah.
disorienting. What if I look drastically different? I think that's a brand decision, like a personal brand decision. For me, I will be careful. Like if I want to use AI more consistently, I want to make sure the filter is minimum, like we talked about. It really still very obvious that it's me. So which means the imperfections and things like should be there, shouldn't be overly exaggerated. If it is, then there's a purpose, and I will know something like this is clearly for fun. If I have
Yes.
animated eyes and things like that, but that wouldn't be my normal go-to filter or treatment for my content. And I personally want to say this. I know there's a lot of pressure, like social pressure when it comes to social media, a lot of toxicity. Like
Yeah.
outside of AI tools, it's just like how unfortunately we treat each other sometimes. And then I would say, like, for me, I still want to preserve the right to not wear makeup and to look myself. And I really think it's important, as you know, like most days, I'm not going to go exactly the way that we wanted to. So
Yeah.
it's important to, like, if I feel tired, look tired, I can still create content. I have the permission for myself to do that. And
Mm.
so I do want to pause on that to see if you have any reflections and
Sure. Yeah,
questions.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think what stands out to me the most is I think we're in this context that AI tools are here, and there's more AI features. Whether that's tuning the look of your image all the way to now you can produce a fully generative AI video under your name, and share that with your audience. But that with all these tools, I think rather than just I think that there is a distinction between play and experimentation. Like I think it's fun to play with filters, and when I say play, you probably have a closed audience. But when you think about experiment, uh, it's important rather than just to dive headfirst in. It's to like run these small tests and see what the tool could actually do. Because I think we're entering this world where our relationship with our image and the information we consume is very very different from before where everything is completely blurred now, where that line between, am I seeing a real person or is this image real or is this information real is important. And to your point, it's you have to experiment with these tools and see how they change your perception of yourself, but also of the world around you. And I think it's important because that with all of these AI tools, without using them or experimenting with them in some way, you yourself won't know kind of what is possible. Because if I think especially about elder millennials and older, there's a lot of difficulty in understanding what can be created with generative AI tools or products, or you know, is somebody that they see in an image even a real person? There's some really huge basic gaps in, I guess, information literacy that a lot of folks don't have because they're not interacting with the tech. They aren't aware of kind of what's coming out in the world. Um, yeah, and I'm curious, you obviously do a lot of education on your channel. And just to back it up really quickly, I just want to shout out your YouTube channel and other work that you've done. I think you're incredibly creative in your process. You do a lot of work in educating people, and I think um, one of the things that I think really sticks out to me is in this world of YouTube influencers, it's like two things that you do so well. One is that I think you try to provide extremely useful content, but then also you show your work, which I think is very rare for influencers. And we don't have to get into much like how to monetize a YouTube channel and things like that. But when it's these sensitive topics about, perception or audience or monetary value, you actually go and show your dashboards, you show your work, and you talk people through it in a very approachable emphasis on the calm way, which I think is very different from a lot of folks on YouTube. So,
Oh,
uh,
appreciate that.
yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you for noticing. And you just like literally said our style, like our sort of branding, what we believe in
yeah.
over the years, since it's very like an exploratory experience. Like people feel like a lot of creators and people who are creating content now, or older
Mm.
millennials, like I gotta know what I'm about. I need to know the keywords. I need to know the future. I need to know what happens 6 months from now. What your brand is just like you. It's ever evolving. So thank you for noticing that.
Absolutely. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about your audience because I do think, I know that you have a lot of sponsored content up there, but I noticed that, some of the traffic that is some of the more popular videos are around tools like Zoom and how we should how we should teach or create content in this digital space. And I can't help but think, looking at the date of some of those, a lot of it was when people were thrown, maybe thinking about the pandemic, and when people were thrown into a Zoom world without understanding or knowing what that means. And so, can you talk a bit about your audience and who you're looking to educate, or who you're trying to work with?
Yeah, for sure. So we launched our YouTube channel at the end of 2019, and that at that point we put up a project, an expensive project on Amazon Prime. It was a documentary series. So we traveled the U.S., the United States, from East Coast to West Coast and back. And it's interesting. YouTube suddenly just felt like this kind of low-hanging fruit. Like we should really explore and have fun and not worry about spending so much money. And suddenly it took off because of the pandemic. And that's interesting. We talk about how our audience will shift from time to time because I think about the people who found me at the very beginning, they were all fitness and dance instructors who desperately need to get online, i.e., using Zoom to continue teaching. Many of them were women, and they really needed a way to kind of continue their career. That's how they got paid. That's how they raised
Mm,
families when you think about it that way. So I focused on like audio, video treatment, how to look good, how to play with different cameras, not just a webcam, how to connect different cameras. And that type of content became very popular very fast. And even today, now, a lot of people I still speak with are, webinar companies, webinar hosts, people who are creating content on a regular basis. We're talking about some of these companies who are running webinars like at least once a week, multiple times a week with these quarterly meetings. And I had the pleasure of interviewing like Steve Wozniak and Mark Cuban, Ariana Huffington as a result of this. Now there's another, section or category of my content right now. It's like a lot of these creators, they're maybe independent creators, freelancers, consultants, or there may be content marketers within these bigger, even enterprise companies. So I want to target them to kind of help them move along to realize what are some of the technology or some of the options out there, including AI. Right now, I think we're having a pretty major focus on AI or AI features from within tools that were not
yes.
initially known as AI tools, for example, like Adobe Express. So it's been such an interesting journey. And Kevin, that's kind of who I serve. And being able to talk to these people, like you said, showing them behind the scenes dashboard, not skipping steps, talking to them like real people and
Mm.
showing them where I may be struggling, slowing down while using these apps and trying to be as authentic as possible.
It's so interesting that you kind of, think something that we share uh, in terms of the audiences that we're speaking to is people who need to communicate in a new medium, whether that's by force of new tech or a pandemic, or something that they have to do for their job. And I
Mhm.
think what I what I think that the challenge that I have, you said you always show your work and you don't skip your steps, but you're also, it's funny because your platform is also primarily on YouTube, where
Mhm.
there are a lot of expectations about what is this video content going to look like and feel like and sound like if
Mhm.
I get it on this platform. And so I'm wondering, maybe if you could, this is something that I struggle a lot with, this idea of providing useful content where you have to show your work, but then also I don't even like to say the limitations of people's attention, because I think it's up to people how they spend their time, and what when they decide to move on from video. But how do you balance this idea of providing useful content, but also making sure that it isn't 30 minutes long, or that it isn't 15 minutes long, because that is something that a lot of folks who use Synthesia and AI avatars for the first time, they're new to video, but they
Mhm.
don't have any rules or conceptions in their head about how they should present their information to people using video.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think there's so many different ways of tackling that. So maybe I'll offer a few ideas and we can dive in a little bit deeper.
Sure.
So when it comes to launching and creating videos on YouTube, I mean, there are a lot of experts or a lot of people who are doing really well. Like Ali Abdal does a great job. There's so many examples to name. So I think as a creator, to see the people you follow, the people that who really resonate with you, whose content resonate with you, kind of break down their content and see what you can learn from them. That is at a high level. And I would say that secondly is to experiment different types of approach, like how you open, go through a video, how to conclude a video,
Mm,
and how to really find your own style. I think especially since 2024, you notice the trend on YouTube is a lot of people, number one, there are a lot of people quitting YouTube, and a lot of successful YouTubers quitting YouTube. I thought that was fascinating. And the other is changing those people who didn't quit or actually came back after a year of not publishing. They're coming back to say, it's time for me to be myself. And I'm going to not follow the algorithm of YouTube. And that's shifting, that's changing very rapidly because a year ago, Kevin, were to have this conversation about monetization, I would say, you know what? It's a HICC model, hook, intro, content, call to action.
yes.
And right. Like I worked with clients who I would literally give them the spreadsheet. They have to be trained on that. But nowadays, I think it's important to see that different styles, like who you really are, and watch your own video. I know that can be a little cringy sometimes, but you got to
Yes.
watch, invite your friends, like maybe not necessarily your parents and like family, but having other content creators to critique and give you
Yes.
very supportive and helpful feedback on
Yes.
that.
Faye, I mean,
Mhm.
you just dropped three really big golden nuggets, and so I'm, one, I want to follow my curiosity, and then we can talk about the video breakdown because I think it's such a good way to move from just somebody who watches content to somebody who creates content. But
Mhm.
I may have missed something, but why are people who've been big names on YouTube? What is this mass exodus? Why are people just really quickly, why are people moving away from the format or from creating on YouTube?
I think there are a lot of decisions that are not under our control. So for years, I think for us as data back to 2019, uh, people got on YouTube because a lot of people want to start making money, and the
Yes.
people who already were making money, they want to make more money. And
Yes.
in order to do that, you're pleasing basically a robot. You're pleasing the YouTube algorithm that was ever changing and evolving, and that
Mm,
was very frustrating. However, if you go take online courses, if you look at even some of the algorithm, trying to anticipate that with your own videos, right? Because behind the scenes, Kevin, if you're on YouTube, like each video I have very detailed analytics. Luckily that we have access to that compared to for us being a podcaster for 10 years, we still don't have that data. So
yes.
data is very exciting. However, it can really paralyze you as well because it's very easy for you to go back to your videos. For example, you mentioned Zoom. That's how a lot of people got to know my channel, which is a good
Yeah.
thing. However, YouTube kind of expects me to continue to be the Zoom person forever and ever. Literally,
Yes.
like, not
Yes.
stepping out of that's just a keyword or topic. Zoom webinar. That's
Yeah.
it. Stay in your lane. We have like, I've collaborated with Synthesia and create a bunch of videos that I'm really proud of. But YouTube is not going to necessarily push that because it feels like it's a little farther removed from Zoom. But I still want to create that. It's important for my brain. So I think that's why for the YouTubers breaking away from the algorithm, for them, they think about, I mean, I will pause in a second because a lot of big YouTubers and small ones, there's a budget, there's a team behind their production. It's not just Sunday morning, they woke up, they did this, and they start to make money. Now
Yes.
we're talking about doing the same things, spending a lot of time. It really consumes you. It costs you. And now
Yes.
you're getting paid 20, 30% of the money, and you don't even feel true to your content. That's
Yes.
one of the bigger reasons why a lot of people have left YouTube.
A couple things in there that resonate a lot with me. One is this idea of like the algorithm with a capital A, where no matter your channel or the content that you're creating, uh, whether that's on LinkedIn or YouTube or TikTok, it's like the algorithm is almost like this religious other that people have all these superstitions to. Um, you talk about the importance of data and analytics, and I think those are really great for ensuring that you understand, who your audience is and what they're engaging with and for how long. But also
Mhm.
there's a piece to all this, which is I think in being a creator, I think the one through line that I can think of is the importance, but also the difficulty of consistency,
Mhm.
where you have, regardless of how you're feeling or what your numbers are or how you're feeling that day, that's what these channels prioritize as content. Like they're at the end of the day, they're just platforms, and that to me is one of the things that kills creativity or the products that that we're trying to put out into the world. And um, I think it's in particular, it's like if you can avoid being on a platform, but you can still create,
Mhm.
and I'm thinking about all the instructional designers who are in learning and development, or your audience is very specific, and I think it's important to have data, but you're not held to the same standard, I think, as a lot of content creators and longtime influencers, which I think is incredibly important and
Mhm.
hopefully takes a little bit of the burden off of getting started with this. I'm curious. The other thing that you talked about, which I think is so key, Faye, is this idea of analyzing the videos you love or
Mhm.
breaking down a process. I'm wondering, is there, how literally how do you do this at a high level? Do you sit down, and just have a time-stamped Google sheet open and you're writing what is covered when? Are you looking more for just general vibes and style? And especially
Mhm.
with an eye to what do you advise your the people who are just getting started out? How do you advise them to um, start learning to use video or make use of excuse me, of the medium?
I think some people, like people have asked me this question a lot because the
Yeah.
content is somewhat platform specific. So if we dive in and look at how videos are created on YouTube versus Instagram, even LinkedIn, they're
Yes.
all a little bit different. However, when you look at them more holistically, there are trends and techniques that are shared across different platforms. So, for example, on YouTube, you have a bit more of the liberty to create longer form content and help people prepare, set expectations. So I think you asked me a question about short versus long. I just want to say a few words about that.
Yeah.
The reason is I think a video should be as long as it needs to be. However, there are tools out there that we like to use. Like there's a tool called Recut. I think the website is called Get Recut. Literally, one button push is cutting out all the ums and ahs and the pauses. So if you're making
Mm,
mistakes during the video recording, it knows kind of to shorten that just because that's what people are used to. And it's certainly not really the way we have conversations with friends at a restaurant, right? So videos and content typically are much punchier. But I think secondly, about learning from other creators, it's important, especially when we're out of school, college, like it's important for us to relearn or teach ourselves how to summarize, how to learn. And a lot of people think like, oh, I'm constantly learning, I'm doing all this at work. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the things that you have learned from corporate America, you kind of have to unlearn. You have to question, right? What is the
yes.
formula or question the common belief system? So you have to ask yourself, what's really making me want to keep watching this video because your attention is more valuable, expensive
Yes.
than anything else. Is your attention right now? In this case, you're the audience. So for me, Kevin, I will look at number one, different creators. I try not to worship like a single creator. That's number one, like different creators, and I also like to watch creators of different. Honestly, different backgrounds, even different ethnicities. Like I just like to learn from a bigger variety of folks. Number one. Number two, I also want to break down different videos that they have. So it's not just that one video, that one approach to see. I like to learn from more dynamic creators these days, as opposed to people who strictly follow the same formula. We have seen some of the podcasters, for example, will always ask the 8 questions and
Yeah.
never really step out of that formula. That's not really my style. I don't want to learn from that. So knowing who you're learning from, um, but at the same time, like the most important thing I think is allow yourself to start to make mistakes because what's happening here is we're living in this world where a lot of things are measured based on analytics, i.e., money and numbers. Numbers in this case could be views and likes and comments and all that. So I get it. It's simple. It's a simple measure. The world is doing it. I'm not preventing you from doing that, but also, be aware there are other things to pay attention to. So I'll leave you with this, Kevin, that on my YouTube channel, yes, there are like I think one of the most popular videos maybe have like 400,000 views on a Zoom video, like just straightforward, straight up Zoom. But I also have a lot of Zoom webinar videos that have fewer views.
Hmm.
We're talking about this was also years ago, like 10,000 views, 5,000 views, 5,000 to 30,000 views. However, I've gotten a lot more business from those videos compared to the most viewed videos. So think about as you mature as a creator, like, what is the content you're trying to create? Who are you trying to attract? And it's okay if
Mm,
one of my clients has a video that has 100 views, and because of that, he got hired twice, got, brand sponsorships, got hired by companies to pay him $10,000 for keynotes and
mhm.
white label videos that he was gladly going to do it for free. So it it is not quite what it seems always on the surface. So you got to keep exploring.
I, the thing that you brought up that I think that I'm really reacting to is this idea that a lot of the one you have to keep creating and you have to keep trying it out and I think it's useful to in teaching we used to say beg borrow and steal techniques from other people, whether it's if it's a snippy video, maybe you take the hook from one and you think about why they did it that way,
Mhm.
what platform were they doing, what information were they trying to convey, and it's
Mhm.
the call to action from another. So I think there's that idea of always just seeing what's out there and really attempting to understand what was the decision that was made and what was the outcome of that video. And then the other point is yes, we often look at um, money and views as how are people engaging with this, how useful was it, but we
Mhm.
also miss the point that every video that we create has a specific purpose. And
Mhm.
so whether it was maybe your video that has 400,000 views, the purpose of that was audience reach and engagement.
Mhm.
But
Right.
this person who created that video with 100 views, maybe that point of their video was just to explain a specific topic that a niche audience that
Mhm.
pays very well has
Mhm.
a would see and is interested in. And so I love
Mhm.
this idea that every video you do it as a creator it has a particular purpose or it's crafted with purpose and it's not kind of just to generate everybody thinks it's I think that virality is something that sells itself very easily because everybody can imagine, oh, what if my video had a million views, but
Mhm.
you'll never get there unless you start somewhere and keep keep creating and keep building different types of content.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I'm curious what to you know to bring it a ways back. I think just following my own curiosity for a second,
Mhm.
something that I found fascinating about your background is when we talk about this idea of consistency, you have a
Mhm.
lot of I guess like you have a past history in being a creator, but also you've got some fantastic accomplishments that I think are absolutely worth mentioning. Like you're, captain of a men's
Mhm.
hockey team, and you're a third degree black belt, or that you're one of the youngest radio disc jockeys I think that China's had. So I think this idea of consistency in work ethic is not.
Mhm.
I'm guessing isn't new to you, but
Mhm.
I'm curious for people who are looking eh, for that type of drive or that type of consistency to perform well or to create better. Where does that come from for you, or how did you develop kind of that mindset that has led you to create all these different channels and do things to a high level of expertise?
Yeah, I think number one is that you really have to enjoy it. And I think it's not just like follow your passion, because I think all of us do have passions and interests. But if, for example, like early on in our lives, people trying to shut it down, or, either family or siblings or teachers, right? Like there's that kind of black cloud over our heads, like for years and decades of not attempting ever again because we feel like, we're a fraud or we're not good enough. So I
Ugh,
think I want to, like, I think we talked about my mom as an artist, who
yeah.
my mom's actually a pretty well-known artist. I think something that she instilled in me that I'm very, very grateful for until, you know, till this day is the fact that she really believed in me and she was very supportive. And both my parents, even though, I was born in 83, so I'm one of the older millennials. My parents always made sure that I knew that I could try things and I didn't have to be successful right away. I know it sounds so silly. Like, how could you be a child and learn something and just be good at it? They never, they always put me through these, I would say, different healthy challenges. Like, try play the keyboard, learn the piano, that you don't have to love it and you don't have to be better than all the other kids. Like, have fun. They always kind of made it very clear that you should
Yeah.
have fun. And that was so wise of them to do, because if I didn't have fun, I certainly would not continue doing what I was doing. And then just finding the joy, like learning the fact that uh how to fulfill your life, like even as a kid, that okay, you wake up, you go to school, you come back and you help your parents cook, you learn something new, you have good conversations, is something that was always kind of very primary in my life. So for me, I never felt like I had to do something to please my parents or to impress myself. And just like it's just like kind of a like an everyday thing. And I think that was really helpful for me to realize that martial arts is something that you certainly cannot perfect, in days or weeks or years. There are people who are very talented, but it's a pursuit of a lifetime, like a lot of other things we were doing. So like to tie back to YouTube, the way that I kind of stepped into this was this is going to be a pursuit of a lifetime. Not necessarily YouTube as a brand or as a platform, but
Yeah.
being a creator, like creating something and trying different things. For me, that's something I would like to do as long as I'm breathing, as
Yes.
long as I'm living. So that kind of took a
Yes.
lot of pressure off.
As you're going through this, if somebody's just listening to this, you probably won't be able to see this, but I think as somebody who identifies as an Asian creator,
Hmm.
I'm smiling because it's it's kind of the opposite way of how I approached developing talent and
Hmm.
uh, how I approach challenge where this I instead of me having this having these healthy challenges, it was
Hmm.
here's a cello and you will you will be the best one. You will be, get first place at a concerto contest and things like that. But ultimately what it led me to do is as soon as I could, I ran as far away from the cello as possible.
Hmm.
Where and even though I started out at 4 years old, maybe
Hmm.
at the top, as I went on I played cello for 15 years. Towards the end, I was watching people coast by me in terms of talent, in terms of enjoyment, in terms of having
Hmm.
fun with it, because um, that motivation wasn't there. And there's a whole conversation for another type of podcast about Asian identity and and how to develop talent. But I think that's all to say this idea that you're describing about healthy challenges.
Hmm.
Um, I think is part of, if you're building any sort of skill or any sort of talent, it's finding out what's going to motivate you to continue to that next healthy challenge that's scaffolded appropriately. And it's not just about, oh, I'm going to produce the best. I think there are a few people who are motivated by that, but I think for those of us who are just trying to figure something out for the first time or experiment, that idea of healthy challenges is I think so key. Um,
Hmm.
I'm curious. I'm thinking about um, all the things that we've talked about, whether that's new creators or the new technology or new medium and new formats. Um, and I'm trying to think, and also I really like this idea about healthy challenges, and hoping that whoever's listening to this is inspired to make more videos and become a creator themselves. I'm curious, with these new when it comes to video and these new AI tools, do you have any thoughts on the healthy challenges that you set people out to do? Because I think, make your first YouTube video. That's actually pretty lofty to create something and put it out into the world. But I'm curious,
Hmm.
maybe what would the first 3 months of healthy challenges look like for creators who are just getting started?
Yeah, for sure. I think number one, I want to clarify something about AI
Yeah.
because just like what's on popular media, you get two types of articles or content. That AI is the next biggest thing or help you solve every problem you've ever had, even the problems you don't even know that you have yet. Or on the other spectrum, is like it's gonna steal your money, it's gonna ruin your life, it's gonna destroy humanity. There's
Yes.
kind of no article and content in the middle, but the truth is often in the middle. So if we extract the scenarios I talked about just now, I think when you're a creator, you're also a consumer, right? There's kind of that flip flop. Like you have to really think about both. And if we just think about that for a second, like if you're a creator, you're looking at AI for the first time, you're hearing all this, like all these mixed feedback. If we put them in a very general categories, for me, it's is this tool or is this piece of content helpful, or not very helpful or neutral, or it is negative, as it's really out there to get you, trying to harm you, right? So there's kind of generally three category: helpful, like not helpful, harmful, and then in the middle, like doesn't really do anything for you. So suddenly I think you can really approach AI with a much healthier and calmer approach, which is to know that it's not really that extreme. So you can dip your toes into trying things out. So one of the
Mm,
things I think it's really cool is that there are free trials out there, including Synthesia. Like when I approached Synthesia and 11 Labs, like all these AI tools, I was using the free trials. I want to see how it looks, how it sounds. Now, if you're working for a small business or a company, it doesn't really hurt for you to start even with a lower tier subscription, right? Like you want to really explore the tools. Most of them are really quite affordable. Most AI tools these days are under $50 and certainly under $100. I think just give it a shot. And then when you start, again, as a creator or as the user of the tool, is to start small. Like don't pitch it or don't use it for the most important, most complex projects you have, right?
Yeah.
And right, thinking about doing small things like creating micro content with it or something like that. So I think those are, what do you think, Kevin? Like I know you create content regularly with or without AI. Like, do,
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So
yeah.
I think, one of the places that I advise people to start with is you either, what I like to think about this idea of like when working with new creators of what is fit for AI video. Because
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are like, oh, it can make anything. And, I've seen Sora and now it can make videos. And I think that overwhelms a lot of people. And so I'm
Right.
just like, everybody in their daily life has to explain something. There's often questions that you're asked 100,000 times, and it's the same questions over and over again. It's kind of like your own personal knowledge base or help center or how-to guide, where maybe it's people who are asking you about work or something you're passionate about, or
Mhm.
you know, trying to explain some really basic information. I think that's where, really low-hanging fruit that you can turn into an AI video and really just test out what
Mhm.
is it. I think it'll do two things. One, it helps you to figure out what this information feels like when you see it in a video and with a talking head, and what the impact
Mhm.
of that is. But
Mhm.
you can't start with something too lofty. You have to start with something you're an absolute expert in. So you know what, Faye, I'm gonna dial it. I'm gonna focus it a little bit more in that I think everybody has at least one thing that they're absolutely passionate about, whether that's
Mhm.
maybe your TikTok obsession and it's your five favorite influencers, or it's your favorite movie, or it's a dish you like to cook. And it doesn't have to be this super business critical thing. It
Mhm.
can just be a 2-minute video explaining why that thing is important,
Mhm.
how it's made, or what are the component pieces of it, and then what are the benefits or the consequences of knowing or not knowing this information. And if you're able to answer those three questions in a single video about
Mhm.
something you're passionate about, then you'll get a sense for what does it take to create video content or information. I don't know, that's just my what I'm thinking off the top of the head, because I think once you make that first video and you see, oh, this is what I thought the avatars might sound like, and here's what they actually look like,
Mhm.
or this is how it came together in widescreen, but maybe it's actually better for mobile and portrait. But you have to create that first thing, and you have to start with what you know.
Absolutely. I think, you know, people have such different behaviors and I definitely am always been an early adopter because it's more fun that way because I feel like I'm part of that journey, for example, like with
Mm,
Synthesia's AI avatars. I want to even though I might not be there seeing the boardroom like influence certain decisions, but I feel like you guys have always taken my feedback so kindly and
thank you.
somebody's listening. I think that's really important, that collaboration between AI companies and other creators, not just me. That's always been super helpful. And then I also want to comment on like people who are using it for the first time. Like we always think other people are thinking about us, talking about us. They're really not. When you publish a video, either
Ah.
publicly or internally, it's just you who's watching this. Actually, there's a lot of freedom to that, as opposed to when you become a bigger, or like micro, small influencers, or even a bigger influencers. Now the pressure is on. But when you start, there's really very little. All that is internal inside of you.
Oh, if there's one huge takeaway, it's identifying that, taking away that obstacle where
Mhm.
I think that there's a lot of what gets in the way of future creators' journeys is this idea of like, what will people think, or what if they see this video? Because there is an aspect of it where, depending on the platform or where you're putting it,
Mhm.
there's this thought that, oh, somebody's going to see this and they're going to make a mistake. I think once you produce your first 3 or 4 videos and you put them out into the world, you'll
Mhm.
actually have a very humbling experience on how unglamorous or how much really people do not care unless you say something completely off the wall, or if you're a conspiracy theorist, in which
Yeah.
case maybe it's good for you to then know that you shouldn't be putting that information out there because it's not helpful. But it is very humbling having gone through this process myself, and the payoff doesn't come anytime soon.
Right.
And I feel like you could identify that, where if you look at your first videos,
Mhm.
then
It was so bad, so
yes.
nervous, and like I was recording with an iPad or something, and it's interesting how people commented on how, not as people who commented later on as like my creator friends, like how I
Yeah.
looked, and it's so fascinating. And like a quick note on that, right? Like people don't realize people you can become pretty self-conscious, like looking at yourself for the first time on camera, like the almost similar to the way you first heard yourself. It's like, who is this? I feel so weird. Like, why is my voice so strange? And when
Uh,
camera lenses and filters can do a lot of different things. So I love the fact that like when we first spoke, Kevin, like I said thick skin. Like I'm like, oh, at one point you just don't care. You actually do learn to let go. That's such an amazing feeling to
mm,
realize. I think it took me a few weeks to realize, okay, I'm just ready. I don't really care as much anymore. And
yeah.
that's great. Yeah.
I mean, look, talk about to bring this all the way back to where we started, talk
Mhm.
about taking back control of your identity, especially
Mhm.
if it's in the digital space, where you can really focus on who you actually are and the message you're trying to deliver, as opposed to
Mhm.
focusing on all the little tweaks and turns. But Faye,
Mhm.
unfortunately, I gotta let you go because uh, there's so many other things that I'm hoping that there's another conversation in the future, because I feel like we're just scratching the surface. But I'm curious if folks want to get in touch with you, either to learn more about all the things that you cover, or for your awesome reviews. What's the best way that they can do that?
Yeah, so pretty easy to find me. It's Feisworld, pretty much everywhere. FEISWORLD.com. And I'm also Feisworld on Instagram, and you can find me on LinkedIn and other social platforms, and certainly YouTube, as you mentioned. We have a lot of free tools out there for people who want to get started with YouTube or get started podcasting, doing other things. We have a Feisworld Academy, a lot of free full on like full courses, full blown courses for you to explore. And you can reach me in and ask questions as well. I love interacting with people who want to learn how to become a creator and how to thrive and even how to monetize later on.
Faye, thank you. We'll make sure as all of those end up in our show notes. But otherwise, can't thank you enough for coming by to talk to us. It was wonderful to have you.
Super fun. You're a great host, Kevin. I really appreciate that you reached out.
Thank you.